Welcome to The Value and Why. We are not experts, we are simply average guys like anyone else out listening. What we hope is that by sharing our experiences, it will help promote thought in others to find answers in their own lives.
All right, Alex. So I think what we need to talk about is the awakening.
Okay.
And with the awakening, that there's so many variations of that out there. That you got people that are awakening to conspiracy theories. You got people awakening to spiritual things. You have people awakening to all sorts of other things. And the question is where do you turn? How do you determine what is what? And that's where our question why comes in.
I think it's interesting that you asked that because in my mind, I've had something that I've been saying for a long time now, which is it's not about the tool that's being used, it's about the purpose behind its use. So someone who is becoming a little bit more awake to the goings-on of the world might turn to conspiracy theories, or they might turn to some New Age spirituality videos, or they might turn to something else in their life. And to me, the reason why we ask why about everything is because I think there's a value in all of these things, but it's about the purpose behind why you're investigating it that determines the value. Are you really looking for answers, or are you just looking for something that strokes your ego? Are you looking for something that makes you feel good? Because if you're just looking for something that makes you feel good, you can find that anywhere. But if you're actually looking for answers, then it doesn't really matter where you turn, because that's going to lead you to the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. And that's why I think it's more about the purpose behind why you're going that direction.
Yeah, so going after the answers. So the interesting thing is, one of the main reasons why we started this is so many people like to get into, okay, I just want someone to give me the answers. And so a lot of times when you end up getting into the conspiracy world, that's what you're actually following the same pattern. Mm-hmm. You're getting more of the same answers. And then you jump into the spiritual world, same thing. You have all these just giving you more and more answers. And then you get to a place where you're just in absolute confusion because you don't know what is right and what's wrong, and you don't know what to believe anymore.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that a lot of that suffers from something you and I have discussed many times before, which is the idea that a lot of these individuals will pick one subject and they'll investigate it, and they find some pretty interesting answers. But the problem is that they don't have what you and I call the big picture mindset. They don't take the answers they find from conspiracy theories and the answers that they find from New Age spirituality and the answers that they find from questioning our education system and all these different answers. They don't take them and add them all up. They just focus on one thing, and that goes back to what I was saying a second ago, which is the stroking of their own ego. These individuals will often research one topic, and it's because they want to be considered an expert on that topic. They want to be able to have a following and be like, hey, guess what? I know the answers. Come follow me. I will give you the answers. But what usually happens is what you just said, which is the person who follows them just ends up feeling more lost than they were when they started the whole process, because they're going, yeah, sure, that makes sense, but why?
Or they're running in fear.
Mm-hmm. Which is not a good place to be either.
Well, I found the more you're in fear, the harder it is to determine the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're running in fear, you're constantly just looking for the next thing that's going to run your fear, and you're using that fear to drive the picture going, okay, this must be true, because it's almost like I'm so afraid of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because, oh, I got to go prep. Oh, I got to store food. I got to do all this. Well, it ends up taking you away from seeing that bigger picture and finding what is really out there. And one thing I have found very interesting is for anybody that puts any content out, there's always a little nugget of truth. It doesn't matter who's putting it out. And I find that it's not the whole thing they're giving you, because a lot of times that they are pulling research from someone else, mm-hmm. and they have adopted a lot of things, but even through there's always these one little teeny tiny nuggets. And so it almost appears to me that you have to go very quickly through a lot of stuff to get the bigger picture in order to pick up all the little truth nuggets in order to put it back together, mm-hmm. and see a bigger picture.
Mm-hmm. No, I would agree with that. I mean, looking at the journey you and I have gone on, we have started so far away from where we're at now. You and I have discussed many times about certain topics that we'll go into and say, I never would have thought I'd be researching this in my entire life. You know, I mean, if you told me a year ago that I was going to research this, if you told me 2 years ago that I was going to be doing a YouTube channel on some of this stuff, I would have told you you're crazy.
Yeah, well, we keep telling each other that all through this journey. That the other interesting side is that there were times where you're like, hey, we need to slow down because I mean it was overwhelming. Just how many different directions did we have to go hit? I mean, it was like, okay, well, you got a little information here, and that drove to, oh man, I need to look into this, and then it just kept driving, and we never stayed put on one little thing because it just kept pulling us other places, and it was these little nuggets. And what I have found with the little nuggets is, we've talked about it many times, things my belief tells me, oh no, that can't be right. I normally hesitate, and it would take me a while to finally go, okay, let's look at this. And what I found was, the more I wanted to hesitate on something, there was so much more to be found in it. And the things that I was willing to look at had less to be found.
Oh, absolutely.
And I've found, if you can figure out how to open your mind and be willing to take in anything and then analyze it, then you can come to a much better understanding of whatever you're looking for. But if you sit there and you hold back and go, no, I won't look at that because I don't believe that is something proper to look at, then all of a sudden that you have limited your ability to grow.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think that one of the values that we've had through you and I researching this is that, you know, we have two minds. So you're able to look into something while I'm also looking into something completely different, and then we can come to the table and be like, hey, what'd you find? And hey, well, I found this, and you might take that, and I can't tell you how many times that we've had it where, you know, I'll come to the table and tell you something that I've learned, and it completely applies to everything that you were researching, even though it was something completely different from what I was researching.
Yep.
And I think that's another reason why we wanted to start this channel too, is to give people a place where they can bring their thought processes and their ideas to the table and say, well, have you ever thought of looking at this? You know, you and I can take a look at them, or maybe we'll give them ideas to go research something of their own. Because I think the problem is a lot of the questions that we ask, the interesting thing is that most people will look at you like you're crazy for asking them. But I think what I've found is that most people ask those questions, they just never tell anyone about it. And that's the really funny part of it, is that because they never tell anyone about these questions that they're asking and saying, hey, I have doubts about what I've been told about this, they never express those doubts, they never express those questions, so they never get answered. Instead, they end up being one of those guys who's delving deep at 2 a.m. on some conspiracy theory videos, and they're hiding it close to their heart and saying, well, I'm a conspiracy theorist, but I better not ever let my loved one know because I'll be crazy.
They're in the closet.
Yeah. And that's the whole point of this, is saying, hey, look, I get it, it's uncomfortable, it's not easy, but I think it's our responsibility to ask these questions because for no other reason than to be honest with ourselves. I highly doubt there's anybody out there who truly 100% believes everything that we've been told about mankind, our universe, how everything works. I don't think that there's a person out there who 100% believes it.
Yep.
Because the funny thing is that most of the people who would claim that, most scientists and things of that nature, are in their job because they want to find the answers. So even the ones who are pushing the so-called answers to you that we question are also some of the most troubled people who want to find more because they know there's something missing.
Yeah, and that brings me, it's very interesting to think about, okay, when you're growing up as a child, and typically in school, I think many people can relate to this, that you would ask many questions and then you would get the response out of the teacher that typically, well, here's how it is. And it was like a hard stop. And it's like, okay, you're just supposed to believe this. And it seems to me the further you go along with school, it's not about questioning, it's about just taking in information.
It's about accepting.
Accepting. And then when we become adults, we do the same thing. We just start accepting. And so this whole process ends up being, okay, I've been trained, I'm just supposed to accept, but I'm noticing there's lots of things that don't seem right.
Mm-hmm.
And it draws a lot of questions. And then, of course, when you bring it to other people, that they just look at you because they can't accept what you're bringing because it's not the mainstream norm.
Well, it's because they've already, and the key word is accept, they've already accepted another reality. And once they've accepted that reality, to break them of that, it's so much harder. I mean, you're talking about taking someone not just out of their comfort zone, but completely changing their worldview in such a way that they have to accept that their reality might be wrong. And on a fundamental human nature level, it's uncomfortable, but also dangerous to do that. Our minds will justify almost anything just to make sure that we're sane. I mean, talking about, I did a paper one time on high stress scenarios, and talking about how a lot of the times after people get through these high stress scenarios, let's say that they were in a firefight or something, they won't remember a lot of details, but they'll sit there and think so hard about it to try and piece it together that their mind will now come up with fake details to throw in there just so that they can bridge the gaps, because they're literally driving themselves insane trying to remember this. And so our mind has funny little self-defense mechanisms in order to keep us from accepting something that might be hard to accept. And that's one of the dangers in this, one of the hard parts, is that we are so fundamentally programmed to accept whatever is given before us. To break that down, it takes a tremendous amount of energy and a tremendous amount of work to even ask the question, why? And that's really where the whole thing begins, is just saying why. You're talking about kids in school. I mean, I remember when I was doing school, the biggest thing that annoyed me was I would ask a question and someone would just tell me, look it up. And it would annoy me because that made me feel like they didn't know the answer to the question. But interestingly, it's also one of the best things for me today because that created a sense of, hey, if I don't know the answer, I need to go figure it out for myself. And I feel like we don't have enough people that do that nowadays.
Nope, they typically don't. And hopefully through this channel we'll encourage many more to go along the journey of asking why.
Oh, absolutely. I'll say real quick that one of the big dangers that I've noticed in society, whether it's been through my upbringing in the church or through military experience, how many people do something just because that's the way they've always done it. And, I'll always, of course, will ask the question, hey, why are we doing it like this? Like, option B seems more efficient. And they're like, yeah, well, option A is how we've always done it. And I look at it and I'm like, okay, well, first off, why do you have to keep doing it that way if the other option's more efficient? And secondly, have you ever asked why you've been doing it that way for so long? Of course, they look at me like I'm stupid, and they're just like, no, that's just how we've always done it, so we're going to keep doing it that way. And it makes me laugh because I'm sure there are plenty of people out there who look at me and think, that guy's crazy, but then I'm sitting here like, well, you guys all do the same thing day in, day out. You expect a different result. I'm pretty sure that's the definition of insanity. All I'm doing is asking why.
That's it. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and then the little bell to get notified.
And also don't forget to like and share our content so that we can get this out there. If you guys have any questions that you want answered or you have any suggestions for a video topic, please feel free to put that in the comments below.